HOA blamed me for a massive flood, then sued me for $2.8 million over a river I didn't own. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, we would like to ask you for one small favor. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss any of our latest videos. It only takes a moment, costs nothing, and is one of the best ways to help us continue creating powerful, emotional and dramatic stories like this one. Your support means more to us than you can imagine. Also, let us know where you are watching from today. Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now, let us return to our main character. $2.8 million, Marilyn Voss said into the television camera, and every penny of it is his fault. I heard her voice through the cracked screen of my phone while 3 industrial pumps growled outside my kitchen window. Muddy water dripped from the ceiling into a steel mixing bowl, each drop landing with a hollow ping. The whole house smelled like wet lumber, river silt, and diesel exhaust. I was standing barefoot on warped oak flooring when the process server handed me the lawsuit. The envelope was damp around the edges. Brown fingerprints marked the county seal. Behind him, Blackridge River moved through the trees like a sheet of dark glass, calm now, as if it had nothing to do with the 14 flooded basements, the ruined clubhouse, or the row of news vans parked along Cedar Hollow Drive. I opened the complaint and found my name printed above a demand for $2,800,000. Property damage. Lost home values. Emergency repairs. Negligent diversion of a public waterway. According to the HOA, I had altered the river on my 11 acres and sent a wall of water into their neighborhood. Marilyn stood across the road in a cream-colored coat and clean rubber boots, speaking to reporters beneath a white canopy. Her blonde hair had not moved an inch despite the wind. She pointed toward my property like she was identifying the scene of a crime. "Mr. Barrett has refused community oversight for years," she said. "This disaster was preventable." I looked down at the waterline on my kitchen wall, 38 inches above the baseboard, then back at the complaint. The paper trembled slightly in my hand, but not from fear. I had spent 20 years surveying drainage corridors, road grades, and flood channels across eastern Tennessee. Water leaves evidence. It scratches bark, carries gravel, stains concrete, and deposits debris in the direction it traveled. It does not care about press conferences. It does not follow HOA talking points. And the evidence inside my house was already telling a different story. I pulled on my boots and walked toward the back fence. The ground sucked at every step. Broken branches were tangled against the wire, all pointing downstream. My old sycamore stood near the riverbank with a fresh mud line across its trunk. I raised my laser level and checked the elevation twice. Then I turned toward Cedar Hollow. Beneath the HOA's brand new access road, half hidden by brown water and torn landscaping fabric, sat the mouth of a 48-inch black culvert. A refrigerator door, 2 patio chairs, and a mass of tree limbs were packed against it. Water still hissed through the gaps under pressure. That pipe had not existed 6 months earlier. I took out my phone and photographed the road, the debris, and the survey marker sticking sideways from the mud. Then I zoomed in on the concrete collar around the culvert. Someone had scratched a contractor's initials into the wet cement. MV Development. Marilyn's company. I looked across the flooded yards at the woman blaming me on live television. There was only one problem with her lawsuit. I did not own Blackridge River. And the people who did had never approved what she buried beneath that road. 6 months before the flood, Blackridge River was the quietest thing in my life. It ran behind my property in a slow green curve, about 60 feet across in summer, wider after spring rain, and shallow enough near the bank that you could see smooth stones under the surface. My father used to say the river never changed its mind. People changed the land around it, then blamed the water for remembering where to go. His name was Samuel Barrett, and he spent 34 years surveying roads, farm boundaries, and drainage easements across 3 counties. He taught me how to read a slope before I could drive a truck. He taught me that a bent fence post could tell you more than a witness, and that mud always kept a record. When he died, he left me the house, 11 acres, his survey equipment, and a map tube stored above the workbench in the garage. The house sat on the western bank, outside Cedar Hollow Estates and outside its homeowners association. That detail mattered. My property line ended at the state-controlled river boundary. I owned the soil, the sycamores, the gravel path, and the old equipment shed. I did not own the water moving past them. On clear mornings, I drank coffee on the back steps while mist hung above the river like smoke. I could hear cardinals in the brush and the soft click of my trail camera whenever deer crossed near the bank. The brass survey marker my father installed in 1998 sat 3 inches above the ground beside the sycamore. I checked it every spring. It had never moved. Inside the garage, his old laser level rested in a gray metal case with one broken latch. The instrument was scratched, heavy, and nearly 20 years out of date, but it still measured true. Beside it was a topographic map from 1974, rolled tight inside an aluminum tube. A faded blue line curved away from the main river and crossed what later became Cedar Hollow. That line marked an overflow channel, a shallow natural corridor that carried high water across low ground before returning it downstream. Most days, it looked like nothing more than a grassy depression. During heavy rain, it became the reason houses stayed dry. Cedar Hollow had been built around it, not on top of it. The original developers understood that. Their roads curved away from the lowest ground, and their storm drains emptied into the channel. For almost 30 years, the system worked. Then Marilyn Voss appeared at my gate one bright Tuesday morning in March. Her white sport utility vehicle rolled to a stop on the gravel, polished so clean it reflected the trees. She stepped out wearing cream slacks and boots that had never touched real mud. In one hand, she carried a leather folder. In the other, she held a glossy rendering of 18 new homes overlooking the river. She smiled at my house, my shed, and my work truck as if she had already decided which parts needed to disappear. Then she pointed toward the grassy overflow channel and called it wasted land. Marilyn unfolded the rendering across the hood of her sport utility vehicle, and the glossy paper flashed in the morning sun. 18 identical homes stood in neat rows above a stone entrance marked River Crest at Cedar Hollow. Every backyard faced Black Ridge River. Every brochure image showed blue water, trimmed lawns, and families holding glasses of lemonade on spotless decks. What the picture did not show was the overflow channel running directly beneath lots 7 through 14. Marilyn tapped the center of the drawing with one polished fingernail. She wanted a 30-foot strip along my eastern boundary for what she called improved community access. Her first offer was $42,000. I looked past her shoulder at the low grass bending in the breeze. That strip carried water during every major storm. Selling it would have allowed her contractor to fill the channel, straighten the road, and advertise 8 more Riverview lots. I told her the land was not available. Her smile stayed in place, but the skin around her eyes tightened. She said the channel was an outdated drainage feature and that modern engineering could handle anything the river produced. I asked who had designed the replacement system. She closed the folder. Then she told me Cedar Hollow had already hired professionals. 3 days later, the first violation notice arrived. It accused me of allowing uncontrolled vegetation beside a community boundary. I was not a member of the association, but Marilyn sent the notice on official letterhead anyway. The second letter claimed my equipment shed created a visual nuisance. The third demanded that I remove the brass survey marker because residents had complained it was a tripping hazard. Nobody from Cedar Hollow had permission to walk near that marker. I answered each letter by certified mail. I included my deed, the county parcel map, and the recorded exemption showing that my land was outside association control. Marilyn never addressed the documents. She simply changed the accusation. At the next community meeting, I stood near the back wall while she presented the 18-home expansion to nearly 60 residents. The clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee, furniture polish, and fresh printer ink. Marilyn described the project as responsible growth. She called the grassy depression an abandoned ditch. When I raised my hand and explained that it was a mapped flood overflow channel, the room went quiet. I showed them a copy of the 1974 topographic map. Several homeowners leaned forward. Marilyn did not even look at it. She told everyone I was a disgruntled outsider protecting an overgrown patch of land because I opposed progress. Then she displayed a newer engineering map on the projector. The blue overflow line was gone. In its place was a straight road leading to the proposed homes. I asked when the county had approved that change. Marilyn smiled toward the board members seated beside her. She said approval was in process and that preliminary work could begin under an existing road maintenance permit. Howard Pike, a retired county hydrologist sitting 2 rows ahead of me, turned around slowly. His face had lost all color. Outside the clubhouse, he caught my arm and pointed back toward the projected map through the window. He said someone had not updated the flood channel. Someone had erased it. Howard walked with me across the clubhouse parking lot while the last residents drove away. The air smelled like rain even though the sky was still clear. He kept his voice low. He had helped review the original Cedar Hollow drainage plan in 1996, and he remembered the overflow channel because the developer had been forced to leave it untouched. It was not optional landscaping. It was part of the county flood system. The next morning, I drove to the planning office and requested every permit connected to the expansion. A clerk named Denise carried out a thin folder and set it beneath the fluorescent lights. There was one active permit. Road resurfacing and curb repair. Nothing about excavation. Nothing about culverts. Nothing about filling a drainage corridor. Marilyn had presented a maintenance permit as approval for an entirely new road. I asked Denise to flag the file for inspection. She promised someone would visit within 10 business days. Marilyn needed less than one. At 5:17 the following morning, the low growl of diesel engines pulled me out of bed. I opened the back door and smelled wet clay, hydraulic fluid, and crushed grass. Yellow work lights moved through the trees. 3 excavators were already inside the overflow channel, digging a trench wide enough to swallow a pickup truck. Dump trucks backed in with alarms beeping through the dark. Workers were unloading 48-inch black culvert sections beside the new roadbed. I grabbed my camera, my property map, and a reflective vest from the garage. The ground trembled beneath my boots as I approached the boundary. A foreman met me near the fence. His jacket carried the logo for MV Development. I told him the channel was protected and asked to see the approved plans. He handed me a single page signed electronically by Marilyn. The document authorized surface repairs. It did not authorize what his crew was doing. He glanced toward the excavator and said he had been told all environmental approvals were complete. Behind him, a machine lowered the first pipe into the trench. The slope was wrong. The pipe pointed toward Cedar Hollow instead of downstream, and its opening sat almost 2 feet above the bottom of the natural channel. Water would have to rise before it could enter. During a major storm, debris would collect against the mouth and turn the road into a dam. I called the county inspector, then the sheriff's non-emergency line. Marilyn arrived before either one. Her white sport utility vehicle stopped beside the equipment, clean tires sinking into the mud. She stepped out holding a tablet and told the foreman to continue. I warned her that the culvert was undersized and incorrectly graded. She said my opinion was not an official stop work order. By noon, truckloads of red clay were covering the old channel. By sunset, the roadbed stretched across it. Like a wall. The inspector finally posted a bright orange notice the next afternoon, but the pipe was already buried. My brass survey marker was gone. I searched the torn ground until dark, finding only a round impression where it had stood. Then I checked the trail camera near the sycamore. The final recording showed an excavator crossing the boundary, its bucket filled with soil. Something small and metallic rolled against the teeth. A worker shouted over the engine that Marilyn wanted the channel sealed before the rain inspection. I saved 3 copies of that recording. 2 days later, the Weather Service began tracking a storm system moving toward Black Ridge Valley. By Thursday afternoon, the storm had stopped moving. It sat over Black Ridge Valley like a lid, feeding on warm air from the south and dropping rain faster than the ground could take it. The first inch soaked in. The next 2 ran across the fields. By nightfall, the river had turned the color of coffee, thick with clay and broken leaves. Rain hammered the metal roof hard enough to drown out the refrigerator. I set my father's laser level on the back porch and checked the sycamore every 30 minutes. The waterline climbed 6 inches, then 9, then 14. At 10:42, I called the county emergency office and reported that the new road across the overflow channel was holding water. At 10:51, I called the sheriff's office. At 11:07, I called Marilyn. She answered on the 4th ring. Music and voices echoed behind her. She was hosting a private preview inside the Cedar Hollow clubhouse for buyers interested in the new Riverview lots. I told her the culvert was beginning to clog. She said the road had been engineered for a 100-year storm. I reminded her that the permit did not cover the road at all. Her voice turned flat. She told me to stop interfering with community operations, then ended the call. At 11:36, the sound changed. Rain still struck the roof, but beneath it came a deeper noise, a low rushing hum that I felt through the floorboards. I pulled on my jacket and stepped outside. Cold water filled my boots before I reached the fence. The old overflow channel should have been carrying the river east through the low grass. Instead, water had spread behind the new road in a wide dark pool. Branches, trash, and construction fabric were packed against the raised mouth of the culvert. Only a narrow stream forced its way through. The rest climbed against the roadbed, inch by inch. I recorded the elevation with the laser, photographed the debris, and called emergency services again. Then the road began to leak along its western edge. Water found gaps beneath the fresh clay and sprayed through in thin brown jets. Within minutes, the pressure opened a path around the culvert. The flood did not come from my property. It curled around the unfinished shoulder, crossed Cedar Hollow Drive, and poured into the lowest part of the subdivision. Porch lights snapped on one after another. Car alarms began sounding through the rain. I drove my tractor toward the clubhouse with the headlights cutting narrow tunnels through the storm. Near Lot 12, an older couple stood beside their stalled sport utility vehicle as water swirled around the tires. I pulled them onto the tractor platform and carried them to higher ground. At the clubhouse, guests were moving through ankle-deep water while Marilyn shouted into her phone. She saw me and pointed toward the river. Before I could speak, she yelled that I had opened a drainage trench on my land. The accusation came too quickly, too cleanly. She had prepared it before the water reached the building. By sunrise, 14 basements were flooded, the clubhouse floor had buckled, and the sales office sat in 3 feet of muddy water. News trucks arrived before the county engineer. Marilyn met them in spotless rain gear and blamed me while the new culvert remained buried beneath the road behind her. I stood beside the sycamore, watching the current settle back into its old path. Mud streaked the trunk exactly where my measurement said it would. The river had not changed direction. Someone had blocked the place it had always used. The county engineer arrived just after noon, when the rain had weakened to a cold mist and the flooded streets smelled like river mud, gasoline, and soaked drywall. Marilyn followed him from house to house with a clipboard, repeating the same sentence to anyone who would listen. Cole Barrett altered the drainage. Cole Barrett redirected the river. Cole Barrett caused the damage. By that evening, her attorney had sent me a formal notice ordering me not to remove soil, clear debris, or repair anything near the water. 3 days later, Rebecca Sloan sat across from me at my kitchen table with the lawsuit spread between 2 cups of coffee. She was a land use attorney from Knoxville, practical, patient, and unimpressed by expensive letterhead. The pumps outside rattled the windows while she read every page without speaking. Then she placed one finger on the phrase privately controlled waterway and asked me to show her exactly what I owned. I brought out the deed, the county parcel map, and the aluminum tube from the garage. The old paper smelled faintly of dust and machine oil. We flattened the 1974 topographic map beneath 2 salt shakers and a socket wrench. My property line followed the western bank, then stopped at the legally surveyed river boundary. Black Ridge River itself belonged to the state. Any permanent structure that changed its flow required state review, environmental approval, and a separate permit from the county. I owned the ground beside the river. I did not own the river, its bed, or the public drainage corridor connected to it. Rebecca leaned back and looked toward the new road through the kitchen window. Then she smiled for the first time. If Marilyn wanted to prove that I had illegally redirected public water, she would have to explain why her own contractor had excavated beside it, installed a culvert, and buried the overflow channel without authorization. We spent the next 4 days building a timeline. My certified letters showed when I warned the board. Phone records showed when I called during the storm. The laser readings showed the water rising behind the road before it entered Cedar Hollow. The trail camera showed the excavator crossing the protected corridor. Howard brought a certified copy of the original drainage plan from the county archives. The faded blue overflow line matched the depression beneath Marilyn's new road exactly. Rebecca could have filed a motion to dismiss immediately. Instead, she asked whether I was willing to let the case move forward. At first, I thought I had misheard her. She turned the complaint around and tapped the section demanding discovery of all drainage records. A lawsuit worked both ways. If the homeowners association wanted my surveys, photographs, and communications, then we could demand their engineering reports, board emails, contractor invoices, insurance filings, and internal meeting notes. Marilyn had expected me to panic, settle, or sell the land to cover legal costs. She had not expected anyone to open her records. I looked at the mud drying in the grooves of my father's laser case and remembered something he used to say when a boundary dispute became heated. Never interrupt people while they are signing the document that proves you right. I told Rebecca not to stop the lawsuit. I wanted every page. Discovery began with 6 cardboard boxes delivered to Rebecca's office on a Monday morning. The paper smelled like dust, toner, and damp storage. Marilyn's attorneys had buried everything beneath meeting agendas, landscaping invoices, pool maintenance receipts, and years of complaints about mailbox colors. They expected volume to hide the truth. Rebecca expected that too. She divided the records by date while I built a second timeline across her conference room wall. Every warning, permit, payment, and weather report received its own strip of blue tape. By midnight, the pattern started showing. MV Development had submitted 3 invoices before the board officially approved the road project. Each invoice described emergency drainage repair, even though no drainage emergency had existed. The payments came from Cedar Hollow's reserve fund, the account meant for damaged roofs, broken water lines, and storm recovery. Marilyn had drained nearly $900,000 from it before the first excavator arrived. 2 days later, Howard found the missing blue line. It was not merely absent from the new engineering map. Someone had opened the digital file, selected the historic overflow channel, and deleted that layer 11 days before the community meeting. The file history included a username tied to Marilyn's private real estate office. Rebecca printed the record and placed it beside the 1974 map. The curves matched. The elevations matched. Only the blue line had disappeared. Then we found the engineering report. A consultant named Daniel Mercer had studied the proposed culvert and warned that the 48-inch pipe could not safely carry the expected storm flow. His original report recommended an open-span bridge and demanded that the overflow channel remain unobstructed. The version shown to residents contained none of that. 4 pages were missing. In their place was a 1-paragraph summary calling the project low risk. An email from Marilyn explained why. She had written that technical language would confuse homeowners and delay sales. Another message was worse. Complete the fill before the State River office gets involved. Rebecca read that sentence twice, then saved copies in 3 locations. The final piece arrived from Trevor Keene, Cedar Hollow's treasurer. He called from a grocery store parking lot because he did not trust his home telephone. His voice shook as he explained that Marilyn had pressured him to approve the transfers. He brought us a flash drive containing budget spreadsheets, canceled checks, and private board notes. Buried inside was a projection for the 18 new homes. Marilyn's real estate company would receive a commission from every sale. Her brother-in-law owned MV Development. The road was never a community improvement. It was the entrance to a private profit machine built with homeowners' money. Trevor also showed us a column labeled recovery target. The amount was $2,800,000. It appeared in the budget 3 weeks before the storm. Rebecca stared at the number, then at me. The association had calculated its shortage before a single basement flooded. Marilyn was not using the lawsuit to recover storm damage. She was using the flood to replace the money she had already spent. On the wall, the blue tape formed one unbroken line from the erased channel to the missing reserve funds. The river had exposed the road. The lawsuit was exposing everything else. The hearing began at 9 in the morning beneath fluorescent lights that made every face look pale. Marilyn sat behind 3 attorneys with a leather folder open in front of her, the same kind she had carried the day she first offered to buy my land. She wore a cream jacket and the calm expression of someone who still believed paperwork could be arranged to tell any story she wanted. Rebecca placed my father's laser level on the evidence table. The gray metal case looked small beside the polished binders and digital screens, but it was the only object in the room that had measured the ground before anyone tried to rewrite it. The association's engineer spoke first. He displayed a colored model showing water leaving my property, crossing the river boundary, and flowing downhill toward Cedar Hollow. The arrows were bright red. The animation looked convincing until Rebecca asked him to identify the elevation at the western bank. He gave the number. Then she asked for the elevation at the clubhouse. The room went quiet. His own figures placed the clubhouse nearly 3 feet higher than the path he claimed the water had taken. The model required water to run uphill. Rebecca opened the laser records, the time-stamped photographs, and the readings taken at the sycamore during the storm. One by one, the red arrows disappeared under actual measurements. Howard testified next. He explained the historic overflow channel and showed the original county plan. Then Rebecca placed Marilyn's altered map beside it. The missing blue line became the center of the room. Marilyn's attorney called it a drafting update. Rebecca displayed the digital file history showing the exact date, user account, and deletion. Then came the trail camera recording. The screen showed the excavator crossing the protected corridor, lifting soil, and carrying my brass marker in its bucket. The audio captured the worker saying Marilyn wanted the channel sealed before inspection. Nobody spoke when the video ended. Rebecca moved to the financial records. She showed the reserve fund transfers, the invoices from MV Development, and the engineering warning that had been removed from the presentation. She displayed Marilyn's email ordering the fill completed before the State River office became involved. Finally, she placed Trevor's spreadsheet on the screen. The recovery target had been entered 3 weeks before the storm. $2,800,000. The same amount demanded from me. Rebecca asked Marilyn how she had calculated flood damages before the flood occurred. Marilyn looked toward her attorneys. For the first time, none of them looked back. Under questioning, she admitted the number represented projected losses, depleted reserves, canceled sales, and expected legal expenses. It was not a repair estimate. It was the amount needed to make the association whole after financing her expansion. The judge removed his glasses and studied the screen for several seconds. Then he dismissed every claim against me. He authorized our counterclaim, ordered the association to preserve all financial records, and referred the permit alterations and insurance filings to state investigators. The association's insurer withdrew its defense before lunch, citing intentional concealment. Marilyn had entered the courthouse demanding payment for a disaster she blamed on me. She left carrying a copy of the order that opened every account, every email, and every private agreement she had tried to hide. The lawsuit had been designed to bury me under a number too large to fight. Instead, that number became the first clear measurement of her fraud. By early spring, the road across the overflow channel was gone. State crews cut through the packed clay, removed the undersized culvert, and reopened the shallow green corridor that had carried floodwater long before Cedar Hollow existed. For 3 weeks, the valley smelled like wet soil, fresh gravel, and diesel exhaust. This time, every machine had a permit posted where anyone could read it. Every elevation was checked twice. Every load of dirt was documented. Marilyn had been removed from the board before the first excavator arrived. The state investigation uncovered altered permit records, false insurance statements, undisclosed commissions, and reserve fund transfers that had never been approved by the homeowners. Her real estate license was suspended while the case moved forward. MV Development lost its county contracts, and the company was ordered to repay money taken from Cedar Hollow's emergency fund. The association settled our counterclaim using insurance coverage that still applied to the innocent board members, recovered contractor assets, and funds returned through the investigation. My legal expenses were paid. The damage to my property was repaired. More important, the families whose basements had flooded were not left carrying the full cost of Marilyn's choices. Trevor became interim board president, although he accepted the position only after the bylaws were changed to require public bids, independent engineering review, and resident access to financial records. Howard helped design the restored flood corridor. He refused payment and said he had been waiting 28 years to see the original plan respected. The 18 Riverview lots disappeared from every sales brochure. In their place, Cedar Hollow created a protected greenway with native grass, warning markers, and no permanent structures. The first heavy rain came in April. I stood on my back porch with my father's laser level while water rose through the trees. It reached the overflow channel, spread across the low ground, and moved beneath the new open-span bridge exactly as the old map predicted. No alarm sounded. No pump started. No muddy water entered a single home. By afternoon, the river had settled back between its banks. A county worker called me several days later. While removing the old roadbed, his crew had found something inside a load of hardened clay. I drove down to the site and saw my father's brass survey marker resting on the tailgate of a work truck. One edge was scratched, and dried mud filled the stamped numbers, but it was still intact. I cleaned it with a shop rag, carried it back to the sycamore, and set it into the original impression near the bank. Then I opened the gray metal case, leveled the old instrument, and checked the position. The reading landed exactly where it had before the construction began. I stood there listening to water slide over stones and wind move through the new grass. Marilyn had tried to turn a public river into my private liability. She had tried to turn missing money into flood damage and a false accusation into a legal fact. In the end, the river was never mine. The flood was never mine. The debt was never mine. The only thing that belonged to me was the truth, and that was the one piece of property she could never take.